Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. I made a video a couple of weeks ago discussing the recent casting for Severus Snape in the upcoming Harry Potter HBO series, and let's just say there were some strong opinions. In fact, that video got over 3,000 comments, and the basic gist of the conversation was this: people really care about who plays Snape, and rightly so. Alan Rickman left behind some pretty massive shoes to fill, and his portrayal was so iconic that it defined the character for an entire generation of fans. And that's one of the reasons that this casting choice has stirred up so much controversy. When you're replacing someone like Rickman, someone who owned it as much as he did, you can't just cast anyone. But here's another issue. The whole point of the show was to create an adaptation of the story that's faithful to the books, and by casting a black Snape, they've already contradicted themselves. Papa Asidu, who has been cast as Snape, is a great actor. He really is. I've watched a lot of his stuff in the past, and maybe Papa will do an excellent job at capturing Snape's essence. But the problem here isn't about acting ability, it's about DEI taken way too far. Why even bother advertising the program as book accurate when, before the show has even started, you're taking liberties that undermine the very goal of the entire project? But all of that aside for a second, there's one more aspect that hasn't been discussed as much, and that's how the decision to cast a black actor as Snape might affect how certain elements of the story are perceived. Because like it or not, Snape's role in the narrative involves themes of prejudice, marginalization, and being treated as an outsider. And casting someone from a historically marginalized group brings a whole new layer of meaning to that dynamic. Now, I'll get even more into that with some very specific examples in just a minute. But first, let's take a look at the facts. Alan Rickman's appearance very closely aligns with the way that Snape is described in the books, and Papa Asidu's appearance doesn't align. Snape is described as tall and thin, with long greasy jet black hair, framing his pale, almost ghostly complexion, and his most striking features include his hooked nose and cold, penetrating black eyes. And these are important distinctions to be made because Snape's physical description is pretty integral to his whole character. He's a bit of a mess, conventionally unattractive, greasy jet black hair, pale complexion, and Asidu doesn't fit any of these descriptors. He's a good-looking guy that couldn't look further than what book-accurate Snape is actually supposed to look like. He doesn't have long greasy black hair, yellow teeth, pale skin, a hooked nose, or any of the physical traits that embody Snape. The only accurate aspect of his character is that Asidu is roughly the right age. I've seen some argue that the physical characteristics of Snape are not well represented in the books, but I completely disagree with this. And if you need further clarification on what Snape is supposed to look like, then look no further than the original Snape illustrations from both Rowling and Mary Grun-Prey. If writers said we're reinterpreting the series, I wouldn't see an issue with all of this, but to claim that they are creating a faithful adaptation and then blatantly disregard this with their casting decisions just feels unusual. And I think that the black representation in my own comment section has made it clear that they don't want black Snape either. No one wants disingenuous pity casting, and this is one of the best examples I've ever seen of DEI taken way too far. If you don't believe me, then just listen to some of these comments from black Harry Potter fans. I'd also like to add that I really didn't have to dig far into the comments to find these. I'm black, and I can say this actually harms black people more than it would if they just created a whole new story. If they made a story with a black main character going on whole new adventures, I'd love it, and would feel more represented than having a black person just replace a canonically white one and shoehorned in awkwardly. It just shows how lazy and creatively bankrupt this project will be. I expect mediocre CGI, decent acting, and nothing new or exciting. As a black person and Potter fan, I'm not happy at all. This is just annoying when he could have played Kingsley. I'm black and British, and I agree with you on everything. I'm black, and I find it a disgrace. As a black man, I'm not with the whole DEI thing. Keep Snape white. As a black man, I am disappointed with this casting, especially because they advertised it as book accurate. I'm a 58-year-old black man, and I think that making this guy Snape is ridiculous. There is a black wizard that the guy could have easily played and expanded on, but they race-swapped Snape for no reason other than to be controversial. As a black man myself, I believe Professor Snape should be a white man with black hair. Adam Driver would have been a good start. As a black man, just no. I think the message is fairly clear here. Now, I could post these all day, but what I want to focus on instead is another one of the comments that piggybacks on my earlier point. This adds a stupid racial undertone to so many things that don't need it. Marauders bullying a black kid, Harry being suspicious of the only black teacher, etc. And this is a really great point, because what this highlights is that this forced casting may end up hurting the very people it's meant to empower. Casting a black actor as Snape, of all people, a character who is relentlessly bullied, distrusted, and ultimately killed, unintentionally introduces a host of troubling optics. Suddenly, scenes that were originally about power dynamics, schoolyard cruelty, or moral ambiguity now risk being interpreted through a racial lens. James and Sirius don't just look like arrogant bullies anymore. They look like privileged white kids targeting a black student. And Harry's inherent distrust of Snape now looks a lot more loaded than it was ever meant to be. This doesn't help black representation, it twists it. Instead of writing new, powerful roles for black characters in the wizarding world, this kind of decision inserts them into old, painful tropes. And that's not progress, it's lazy storytelling masked as diversity. But I'm not finished. What really worries me is that if this show ends up being bad, or even just divisive, people aren't going to blame the writing, or the direction, or the creative vision. They're going to blame him. That's the problem with this kind of casting when it isn't handled with care. It opens the door for bad faith critics and trolls to say, see, this is what happens when you make things woke. It gives racists ammunition. It turns a discussion that should be about performance, storytelling, and adaptation into one about identity politics. And in the end, it's black people who lose. Instead of being given powerful, well-written roles created for them, they're shoehorned into legacy characters, set up to be criticized, and then blamed when things go sideways. That about covers the out-of-universe stuff. Now let's take a look at the long list of in-universe implications that come from this decision. Here are the first that come to mind. First of all, we've got the Snape v Marauders dynamic, which is already a troubling case of relentless bullying. James and Sirius, popular Gryffindors, routinely target Snape, who's isolated and misunderstood. James Potter quite literally hangs Snape from a tree in front of a crowd, strips him of his dignity, and mocks him just for existing. Now picture Snape as a black man in that scene. This escalates the whole thing from school bullying to something that unintentionally echoes racialized abuse. It also makes the idea of him being the scapegoat for everything wrong with the series even more uncomfortable. Next up, we've got Harry's distrust of Snape from the very moment he meets him. Before Snape even says a word, Harry is already suspicious, largely because of his appearance and the way he carries himself. From that point forward, Snape is framed as cold, dangerous, and untrustworthy. Now imagine Snape is black. That dynamic suddenly takes on a much darker subtext. A young white boy is immediately wary of the only black teacher he meets. And finally, we've got Neville's boggart. When faced with his greatest fear, Neville's mind conjures not Voldemort, not a Death Eater, but Professor Snape. And in front of the entire class, Neville is instructed to humiliate him, dressing Snape up in his grandmother's clothes for everyone to laugh at. Now picture Snape as a black man in that scenario, a black authority figure, already portrayed as harsh and cold, being turned into a literal joke for comic relief, a figure of ridicule in front of a room full of white students. And this is just a handful of the many situations where Snape being black fundamentally shifts the connotation of the story. Even Forbes noticed it. While being black or white may not be inherent to Snape's character, Potter fans note that this will set up situations like James Potter bullying a young black kid in the 70s, which are certainly not good optics and totally change the dynamics of the James Lily Snape storyline. Honestly, it's not that complicated. People want a book-accurate representation, and they're going to dislike black Snape for the exact same reasons that they dislike white Kingsley Shacklebolt. Hopefully, that doesn't give them any ideas. The entire goal of the Harry Potter reboot was to tell the full Harry Potter story and create a book-accurate adaptation, this is key here, that fills things in where the films fell short. Creating a book-accurate adaptation was the whole point, and Asidu is just not a good casting in that sense. Anyway, what do you all think about this? Judging by the comments on the last video, I'd bet there are some opinions out there. Let me know down in the comment section below. If you have counterpoints to any of this, I'd love to hear those too. Also, if you enjoy the content, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and to forget to live